Alrighty then, hey guys, what's up? It is Scisant here, and today we're going to do something a little bit different. So, like most maker YouTube channels, I feel like I don't really do tutorials. These videos are pretty much just following along with the way that I happened to do something, and that's warts and all, and it's definitely not the right way to do it. When I started doing this sort of cosplay stuff, I went so far as to label the first video, the Manticore shirt, as a tutorial. And looking back on that now, I really cringe because there's so much wrong with that. There are so many things that I just did completely half-assed or ass backwards. If I made that again today, I would do it very, very differently. And so I don't want to pretend with the other things that I'm doing that I'm coming from a place of authority or that I'm trying to tell you that this is the way to do the thing. So I very much do try to strike a similar tone as other YouTube channels that make things. I very much try and bring across that these aren't tutorials, this is just following along with me. Learn from my mistakes if you so choose, but ultimately we're just watching me make the thing. This is different. What we're going to do today is explicitly a tutorial. I'm going to show you a lot of... Do I need to say what I'm going to show you? You're going to see them. I'm going to show you a lot of close-ups. We're going to go through the measurements, and I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide on how to make a coin purse, or a coin pouch, if you will. Here's one that I've made here. And I know that when I started leatherworking as a hobby, I was very intimidated by the amount of specialty tools and all that sort of thing that there are. And if you've watched through my videos, you'll notice that I have different tools showing up at different points in the process. And that is because I'm continually buying new tools that do a specific thing that not everyone's gonna have. And there are ways around it, and there are ways to do things without needing all of the tools. And that's kind of what I want to address here. I want to show you how anyone with a couple of very simple tools can make something like this, so that once this whole quarantine blows over, we will all be able to go to all of our fairs and cons and camps and reenactment events and whatever it is that you do. We will all be able to toss coins to our Witcher a little bit more fittingly. So let's move the camera, we'll get some close-ups, and I'll give you a tutorial on how we make a coin purse just like this. Alright, so just to quickly run over the tools that we'll be using, I have an awl here that we'll be using for poking holes in the leather. I'm going to be using some linen thread, and I've got some beeswax that I'm going to run the thread to. That's totally optional. I've got a pair of leatherworking needles here, which are basically just blunt needles that I'm going to run the thread through. If your sewing machine can handle it, feel free. I've got my X-Acto knife here. If you don't have an X-Acto knife, then you can use a utility knife or scissors, or really anything that will just cut through the leather. You can use a paring knife if your paring knife is sharp enough. We're going to be using just a pencil and some paper to draw up our pattern on. The last thing that we've got, of course, is the leather. Now, the leather itself can oftentimes be one of the more expensive parts of the hobby. But what I've got here is an old skirt that I bought from an op shop for $30. This is lovely garment weight leather. You can see that I've already set to butchering it with great gusto. So the tool that we're going to use to get a panel out of this, just a thread ripper, such as like you would use for many a sewing project. And of course I've got a lapped seam here. I don't want to do that because that's going to be difficult, but we will regardless. So let's begin with pulling the threads on this seam. Yeah, that's a decent shot. This last little bit I'm just going to trim off. Let's get rid of this. Now, this is going to be our pattern for the panels. We're going to cut out 4 of these and we're going to cut them out I'll show you how to make them on paper just because I've made one on foam there. So on your paper, what you'll want to do is get your pencil. So we're going to scribe a line 16 centimeters long. That is just over 6¼ inches if you are metrically impaired. And we want this thing to be 7 centimeters wide. And we are going to get about 9½ centimeters down with a straight line. And then after that, we'll get the little teardrop bit on it. Oops, it helps if I put that on camera. So, and then basically I'm just going to freehand a little bit of a curve here. I want it to be fairly, fairly bulbous like that. I'll draw 2 of it. No, I don't like that one. It's a little bit better. I like this one better. So what you can do is just draw one curve, fold the paper in half and use that. But just so that we are just in case you were wanting to replicate this one completely, I'll get my crappy paper scissors. And you know what? I like that curve so gosh darn much that I am going to mirror it. If I decided that I was going to do that before I started cutting out, I could have wasted a lot less paper, but well, here we are. You can either transfer it with a pencil or just cut it out with scissors. Or do both. And this is, of course, just by way of making sure that it is completely symmetrical, which is not necessary. And just to show you that I'm not trying to mollify here, here's the original pattern on foam. I don't know how clearly that's coming across because it's translucent foam, but you can see that that curve follows that pretty nicely, but then on this side it's a much more shallow curve. It's much more in line with the curve that I actually drew. So that goes to show you how consistent my pencil work is, but it's absolutely not essential that this be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. So now what we're going to do is transfer this onto this and cut out 4 of them. Now I'm just going to put a couple of weights on the paper to hold it down while I trace around it. And are there any more appropriate weights than Emirovar Emreis himself and the Golden Sun? I bought these coins from a Russian seller on Etsy. I'm going to use a pen for this, I think, and see how it comes up. You can use a tracing wheel or something for this if you have it. However, because this is ostensibly a tutorial where we're not using any specialty tools, I shall not employ mine. Almost impossible to see. I have no idea if that's even showing up on the camera. It isn't. I can just about tell where that is. So, now I'm just going to freehand this. You can, of course, feel free to use your ruler if so you please. Tell you what, for how bloody invisible the line was, I am pretty chuffed with that. So, I'll just cut out 3 more of these. Okay, so now we've got our 4 pieces. The next step is to actually make the holes in them so that we can attach everything together. So normally at this point, I would get out something like this, or perhaps something like this. These are both specialty tools. This one, I don't really know what it's called, but it will gouge out a certain amount of leather a certain distance in from the edge. These ones are kind of like Jenny calipers. You can just wind this in, the jaws will expand and contract. I can run that along the edge of the leather and leave a nice clear line that I'll be able to put my stitching holes in. However, we're not going to use any specialty tools apart from a human thumbnail. So what you can do is just run your thumb along the edge. In hindsight, I really should have picked a lighter leather than this for the camera. Can we see that? So you can see here, we've got a little bit of an edge. So that's about 4 mil in from the edge. Doesn't matter particularly exactly how far you in from the edge as long as it's fairly uniform. So just gonna quickly run my thumb down the length of this, keeping the edge at the same spot on my thumb just to keep that line fairly kind of sort of okay. You can do this with, say, a ballpoint pen. You can do this with a blunt awl or, you know, a steel nail. Anything that's just gonna leave a bit of a line on the leather for you to get your awl in. So you'll notice that because I didn't use a ruler to cut this, these edges are kind of all over the place. That's fine. That's fine. We're making something that's a complex 3D shape. We're making something that is, you know, medieval. You know, it's rustic. That's the important thing. So, next step, actually punching holes. Here I have my awl. This is something that you kind of will need. You'll just need a sharp implement, whether you use an awl or a nail or some very sharp tined forks from your kitchen. So I'm going to space these holes 5 mil apart because that is an easy demarcation. Of course, space your lines as you will. Let's start 5 mil in from the edge because why not? That's all the pressure that you need to put on it when it's nice and sharp. So all we need is the hole for this needle to pass through. As you can see, that doesn't need to be very big at all. So you're not going to be needing to wail on this. On the one that I made this with some chisels that I hammered in with a maul. Obviously, that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is we are just using simple tools to evenly put holes in our piece of leather. That's legit. That's what So if you've done it right, you'll be able to follow the outline of the piece perfectly on your punching block. And incidentally, that's why I'm using the nice side of my cheap cutting board here, because I've already done quite a bit of punching on this side. Oh, alright, I'll see you guys when I've gotten all 4 done. So once you've got all 4 pieces with all of the holes punched along both edges, the next step, of course, is to start joining all of them together. So as aforementioned, we're going to be using some linen thread here. The way that I like to measure it is to just roll a little bit off the roll. I'll measure the length that the thread needs to go down, and then I'll get 3 of that. I'll just snip that off. Now again, this is the part that is optional, but I am just going to run it through some beeswax. And that's just a matter of gripping the edge, making sure it gets some wax on it. I'll do that thrice, I believe. Wonderful. Now, put some needles on this. Once the thread is sufficiently waxed, you'll notice that it will stay up under its own weight quite a lot. And that means that I don't need to tie any knots or anything in the thread. Once it is through the needle, I can just pinch it back like that, and that will follow through after the needle. That won't come undone under its own power. Similar thing on the other end. So if you haven't sewed leather before, this is a saddle stitch. So we've got 1 string with a needle at either end, and I'll show you how that works. We're going to be sewing 2 pieces together. right sides together, I'm going to be starting at the bottom and working my way up to the top. I'm going to be doing that to make sure that the ends of the thread are up here rather than down here where the coins are going to reside, and we want the most strength here. So really the first step is just to get it through the bottom hole in both of them, and then to make sure that you're at the halfway point. That looks pretty good to me. There's no real wrong way to do this. Which holes are easier to see? I'll stitch towards myself, and I'm only doing that because these holes are a little bit easier to see. I'm going to punch my needle through there. The first couple you may have to do separately. So I'll push it through there. I'll just separate it a bit. I can see where it needs to go in there, and in we go. Because I've punched these with an awl, there is a tiny bit more resistance than if I would have used a stitching iron. And this is the important part. Whatever operation I do here, I'm going to repeat down the entire piece. I've gone through from my right to my left, and that is going underneath the second thread. So this one goes over the top and in front. I'll try and get a decent shot of that. There we go. That's going back through the same hole. So you can see that the needle is to the front of the thread here. I'm just going to pull that through. Make sure that I'm still about at the halfway mark, and I am. And then it's literally just repeating that operation. So in through from the right. Once you've gotten a few stitches in it, you'll see that I can push right through here. That's because the pieces are aligning themselves, and because we've spaced the holes properly, it means that it is just going to find the matching hole a little bit more easily. So again, through in front. Back out here. And now we're just going to do that down the whole length of it. Okay then, so we've gotten the whole line stitched up to the end here. How do we end this? You can just tie it in a knot, and that's totally fine. However, what I'm going to show you is how you can finish off your waxed thread without needing a knot, without necessarily even needing glue. You can see that my thread here is made up of twisted fibers. Our aim is going to be to basically get a needle in between those fibers. Because the thread is waxed, as we pull it through itself, that wax will really bind it and prevent the linen from moving anywhere. So this is our last stitch here. What I'm going to do is go back through this hole, and we're going to pierce the thread while we do it. Join me on this journey. I'll probably go there. So you can see with the very tip of the needle, I have parted those threads, and I'm going to force the needle through. And I'm going to force it all the way back through the hole here. But on this side, we can see you've got that ring of thread on all sides of the needle. I know that it's pierced properly, so I'm going to pull this through. I'm going to pull that tight. I'm going to do the same thing from the other side, and this one I'm going to do twice so that both of my threads end up on the same side there. So I've split the thread apart. I'm going to push back through that hole, out the other side. But I do want both of them on the same side, so I'm going to do it once more for good luck. Push it through there. There we go. Both threads on the same side. So again, the wax on the threads is going to keep that neat and tidy. It's going to keep that from coming apart. You can see it's not going anywhere. So I'm going to go away and stitch this together in exactly the same way here, but for you guys, you'll see both of them all done right. Now that we have both of these ready to go, all stitched up one side, the next step is to stitch them together like this. So what I'm going to do to add extra strength to this 4-way join in the bottom is I'm going to start one stitch hole over on the wrong side and then stitch all the way down. So we're basically going to be cutting out the same length of thread again. Yeah, looks about right. So I will take that, 3 of that please, and run that quickly through the beeswax. So again, we're just piercing one over on the wrong side. This is going to look a little bit weird. This is going to look a little bit weird because this is currently inside out at the moment. But the thing that you've got to remember is that no one is actually going to be able to see this seam. So it can look as weird as it wants, and that's fine. I'm going to continue stitching towards myself. I'm going to keep up with the same pattern, with the same decision that I made. Now, we're just going to go through here. These holes are going to have a lot of thread going through them. It's going to get pretty heavy traffic. Pretty heavy traffic. These are going to be great thoroughfares of thread. You know, it's going to get pretty busy in these. So now we've got this ridge here. I'm just going to go straight over the ridge. I'm not going to really care too much about what the thread wants to do. Wherever the thread wants to sit, the thread is going to sit, and there's not a great deal that I can do about that. So all that I need to do is make sure that I'm piercing it through the correct holes, and then we will wind up where we want to be. So that's 1. Wonderful. Come on. And the second one is easy to do. So like I said, we're just going to pull that thread tight. It's just going to pinch down that rise however it happens to pinch it down. It's not particularly pretty, it's not particularly neat and tidy, but it's functional and no one's going to see it. So then it is just same old as we go along here. So now we're going to do exactly the same thing on this side. Alrighty then, so now let's finish off the final seam on this the same way that we've done the other 3. You love to see it. You love to see it. There we go. And we are done stitching, so just nip that off. At this point, you might be looking at the video and thinking, Grant, look at this shit, look at this shit. That's actually, that one's pretty neat. Good job there, Grant. Oh, that one, that's beautiful. You did well there, Grant. That's probably what you're thinking. And yeah, I could trim these down, but I'm not gonna. And the reason is simple, is that with the original one, the edges are super, like, God, what was I doing? These are super uneven. Did you notice when I was showing this off and throwing it around at the start of the video? Of course you didn't, because it's normally just kept zooped up like that, and then it's just got this little thing on the top. Okay, that one's pretty darn noticeable. But the point is that you don't have to trim it up nice and neat if you don't wanna. But if you do wanna, actually let's do it. Let's do it. All right, cool. Now the moment of truth, we get to flip it inside out. Ooh, ooh, ooh. That's pretty. That's a pretty object. Let's just real quick, just zhuzh this up just a touch, just a smidge. Just trimming that little corner off, just a mite. There we go, and this one too. All right. And that's looking pretty darn nice. Now, we're gonna need some tools that I didn't go over in the start because I'm a bad presenter. We're gonna be using a wheel punch and some kangaroo lacing. If you have access to kangaroo leather, I really can't recommend it strongly enough for lacing. The properties of kangaroo hide, you can get it so thin and it's so incredibly strong. This will never break in a million years. So just on the bit that we've cut all of this out of, I'm just going to do a little test hole just to confirm that this hole size will be enough for my lacing to go through, and it certainly is. I'm literally just gonna eyeball this. We're gonna put 2 holes on each panel. You can be super duper precious about it if you like, but you know, I'm gonna seize the DM. Maybe there, yeah, that feels good. So I'm going maybe just under a finger width in from the seams. All right, last one. Let's get this kind of even, shall we? About there-ish, I reckon. Yep, 1, and yeah, there, that's good. Lovely. Let's pop some coins in this and see how she looks. I like that. Oh. I've only got 5 coins in there at the moment. Fuck it, let's grab some change out of the shrapnel drawer. Get this Nilfgaardian shit up on out of here. That's a wide enough opening for me to hold it in one hand, go rummaging through it, and pull out coins one by one. It's also no problem to just open it and pour them out. I think that this is a good size. Put that in there, just to give it a bit more bulk and a bit more weight. Now when I drop that, it's gonna wanna settle rather than just kind of bleh. Now that is looking pretty sweet. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I really hope that you enjoyed that video, whether you were following along with it as a tutorial or whether it was just something of interest to have on in the background while we're all sitting at home. Is that too dark? A little. If you're new here, please feel free to hang around. Check out some of the other cosplay videos that I've got. We should have some more of them coming if I can get some parts in the mail soon. That's how we make this cool little coin purse. Take it with you to the fair, toss a coin to your Witcher. You guys take it easy, and I'll see you next time.